Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Boyos Discuss, the podcast where we pick a topic and then shoot the shit about it for a while. This week, we're continuing our review of Shenmue The Animation, where we'll be talking about Episode 3, which is titled Yin Yang. If you want to check out the show, then you can watch the English dub on Toonami, or the Japanese dub with English subtitles on Crunchyroll. With that out of the way, I'm Matthew, and I'm joined by my co-host Ben. How's it going, boyo?
What up?
So before we get into basically the episode outline, we did have sort of like a bit of news in quotes. It wasn't anything too substantial, but basically IGN over the weekend, they had this thing called FanFest, and they had like, you know, trailers and like sort of interviews with people about different stuff. Like they had a trailer and interview for Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, talked about some interesting stuff, but they had one for Shenmue The Animation. And they had like a extended sort of preview for the show, for the episode that we just watched. And then Yu Suzuki, who's the series creator, he had a little blurb that he said. He's just like, yeah, I really hope that, like, you know, this introduces new people to the franchise and it brings in more people so that way we can sort of wrap the story up, you know, once there's more interest. And it's like, please.
That was really vague.
Yeah.
I like the money this is making me. Keep watching.
I mean, it was, at this point, he's getting old. You know, it's like...
So he's fucking George R.R. Martining us? He's just going to fucking create
he's not that
an
old.
epic story and not going to finish it and just be like, maybe.
Get there one day.
Yeah. Hold your breath.
It was still neat, though, like, because I don't think we've seen much from him, like, sort of leading up into this. So it was good to see, like, you know, they sort of reaffirmed that he's involved with it as, like, I think executive producer. And so it's like, okay, it's good to know that he does have, like, input on what's sort of being said. And there are some things that we'll talk a bit about in this episode that sort of expand on stuff we didn't necessarily hear about in the games. And I'll sort of, you know, as we go along, we'll talk a bit about that.
It's a legitimate sentiment to see, like, a thing you're passionate about that's vague being mentioned at all. And you're like, oh, cool. It's like what they say about it.
4?
Exactly. It's like what they say about it. Fucking nothing. But they mentioned it. Oh, well, at least they know it exists. That's
We changed the Twitter banner.
That's all we really want. Yeah, the Twitter banner was enough for me for a minute. It's been like 5 years since any news has come out. I'm like, all right. It isn't just forgotten. That's cool.
All right, so sort of getting into the episode, we open up on Bailu Village again, and Shenhua is she's up to her usual shenanigans, which involve her walking around town mumbling the prophecy. And I think we're all sort of in agreement here. I've listened to a few other you know, like reviews and podcasts online that she, like, we get it.
We fucking get it.
We know you like the prophecy, but like, chill
you can
out.
Like recite it by memory, and I'm calling it fucking now. Halfway through this anime, there's gonna be a recap episode, and it's just gonna be Shenhua wandering the village, going, "Remember when?" and telling all the villagers and saying the prophecy 30 times. They're setting it up.
So she's walking around town, and there's this guy who, in Shenmue 3, he's sort of like, it's very clear he has a crush on Shenhua, and since Ryo is with her, he's like, who the fuck is this guy? And she's like, hey, like, back off, like, it's not like that, like, chill out. And he's like, nah.
Ryo's asexual, I'm pretty sure, so don't worry about it.
I mean, yeah. But, you know, so she's sort of talking with him, and, you know, they're talking by this well, and he's like, you know, well, who the hell would want to come and visit our village from across the sea? Like, we live in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like, what's the point of this? And she just doesn't say anything.
It's just the prophecy one more time in case you missed it. Fucking, so I never asked. So she's Shenhua. Who's Shenmue? Is it a person? Is that a...
It's a tree.
That's right.
It's the Shenmue tree.
The Shenmue tree. What is this fucking series? Because, like, we're going to talk about more of this episode, and it's revealing a lot of, like, what the stakes are and what the threats and shit. And it's, like, cosmic, demonic shit. Black magic. And fucking, I don't know what's... There's demons. There's a dude who wants to take over China. There's fucking all these high stakes. And it's like, now there's a fucking tree with something. What the fuck's the tree, man? Why is the tree the most important thing going on with this? Did they ever explain it?
So it's like... We sort of get the idea that, like... Because, like, the tree is, like, a cherry blossom tree. And outside of her house, she has one. And then outside of Rio's house, there's a cherry blossom tree. And there's all this other sort of weird, like, it's getting into, like, I don't know, theories and stuff like that, where we see flashbacks of Shenhua growing up, or what we assume to be her growing up, but it's very clearly, like, a completely different time period. So it's, like, almost going into, like, past lives sort of thing. And that tree is there in the past lives. So it's like there's more significance to it that we don't even have after we've already seen it and at the end of the second game and then in the third game.
I'm legitimately shocked at how fucking weird this shit is getting. Like, I thought it was just...
I think they've changed, because, like, there's even some weird stuff where, like, I think initially they wanted more mystical sort of, like, weird, like, world-ending stuff. Like, there was gonna be an MMO at one point called Shenmue Online, and it shows, like, in the trailers that Shenhua had, like, mystical powers and could, like, shoot magic orbs and stuff. But I think because of, like, that never went anywhere because they just didn't have the funding, and interest just sort of waned, for an MMO around Shenmue. They were like, that's not really the experience that you're playing a Shenmue game for.
Yeah, Yu Suzuki's just a fucking nerd. It's like, dude, you made like a hyper-realistic life sim. What are you doing with magic beams and demons? And he's like, I do what I want.
So the speculation is that he's sort of like changed his mind on some of that, and like things have, and I'm like, yeah, because there are things, we'll sort of get into it later, and obviously, like, spoiler warning for all this. I didn't mention that earlier on, but if you don't want to get spoiled on any of the games or the show, then sort of stop listening here. But by now you would have been. But so it's like that. I'll wait until we get to that part. We'll see.
All right. It's just it's weird. Like, it feels like two series just like thrown together, where it's like one's like prophecy with world-ending stakes, and the other one is The Sims. Yeah. What is happening?
So from there we get our anime opening music, which is like,
it's a banger.
It is fucking great.
It gets you hyped for nothing to happen. You're like, hell yeah, he's going to a ramen shop. Fucking, it's sick.
Yeah, so it's a really good song. I'm really like, they lucked out with that guy. Like, he's pretty good. But from there we go to the MJQ Jazz Bar, and we get our first introduction to Terry of Yokosuka, who
the boy.
I'm not sure. Like, I think his opening or his intro in the game is a little more impactful, since it's like you don't really see him until you rescue Nozomi after you sort of fight the Mad Angels. So it's like, we sort of got a different introduction.
They should have given him the Master Chen treatment, where the last episode ended with him in the dark,
and it's like his silhouette sort of thing.
Do that. Yeah. Like, they show his face and everything. It's like, oh.
Yeah. So he's talking with some of his goons in the bar, and they're talking about how Charlie got the shit kicked out of him, and they're like, yeah, like, it was this kid, and he's like, oh, I thought it would have been the Chens. And this is sort of like, they sort of allude to it in the games that the Chens are like an illicit organization that does shady shit, but we never really, they don't elaborate on it much.
You don't meet them?
No, you meet them, but like, you don't, like, they don't explain like, oh yeah, they're like antique dealers who illegally smuggle like Chinese artifacts into the country so they can go around customs. Like, that's something that we don't really get in the games.
I'm so fucking stupid. Hold on. Did this just hit me that Master Chen
is the leader of the
Chens?
Yes.
God, I'm so fucking dumb. Oh my god. Okay, it's all coming together.
There you go. So they're like, yeah, some kid did it, and basically Terry's like, okay, like, we have to sort of deal with this now, I guess, And so after that, we go to Ryo, who's going to the pottery shop that Yamagashi-san told him about in the previous episode, so he can get the letter translated. He goes there, and it's been closed for the day, but the kid who Ryo had saved from Charlie in the previous episode, he's like, oh yeah, like, why are you at my house?
The bowl cut boy.
Yeah, the bowl cut boy. Yeah, he's like, yeah, like, I live here, like, my family's here, and my grandma owns the shop, so, like, I can get you in, and, like, you can ask whatever. So he goes in, and his creepy hot grandma,
dude, no, it's like she herself is not hot, but she's got a fucking rockin' bod. I don't know why the animators decided to give her a 20-year-old slim figure, and then wrinkle her face all up. You're like, yeah, it's an old woman. It's like, oh, it's disturbing. It's like the Uncanny Valley thing. I didn't like it.
But, so they go in there, and, she's like, oh, thanks for saving my grandson from that thug that day, like, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. And he's like, hey, translate this letter. Like, it's in these weird Chinese characters that no one can read. And she, in the game, they sort of talk about how she's, like, also a Chinese teacher. And so she, knows all sorts of different forms and writings of Chinese. And so she's like, oh, these are mirrored characters. You have to fucking put them in the conveniently placed mirror here so that way we can read it.
That was a convenient mirror.
Yeah.
And
it is in the game. Like, it's just chilling there. It's like, oh, like, okay.
Was her body just as rocking in the video game?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
What the fuck?
So, the translation is a little different than what it is in the game. So it reads, beware those coming. They seek the mirror. Contact Master Chen for help if the situation gets dire. Signed, Zhu Yunda. And then on the back, this is like the thing that really is different than the sort of code phrase that's listed on the back. It's in this, it's Father's Sky, 9 Dragons, Mother's Earth, Common Allies. Whereas in the game, it's Father's Heaven, 9 Dragons, Mother's Earth, Comrades. Which it's just like I don't know, like a difference in translation.
So yeah. They bring the Russians.
So it's just a different translation, I think, because they vaguely mean the same thing. But
that would be better. Well, I don't know, actually, because it's like 2 words for all of them. So common allies.
Yeah.
It fits a lot better.
Yeah, it just comes down to, like, personal preference and, I guess, what you know. And then on the back, there's also a phone number. She's like, yeah, these ancient characters are numbers, so you should go ahead and, like, try and call that.
I just thought that was funny. It's like, oh, my God, these are ancient characters for...
a phone number. So he goes to this payphone that's at the tobacco shop nearby and calls the number. And it turns out that basically the he calls this number and they say Father's Heaven, and he's like, like it's a code phrase, and so he says the corresponding code words. And then after that, the guy on the other line is like, okay, warehouse number 8. And Rio just doofs it all up. And he's like, is this the Chen residence?
Doofed it up again.
He doofed it up. And so then the person on the other end of the phone is just like, fuck this kid. And he hangs up on him.
Can you, in the game, like, so it's a phone number. And can you in the game, pick up a phone, dial any number?
There are certain numbers that you can call. Like, at the beginning, in the, like, little notebook that you have for all your clues, it has like the 104 number, which is just like an information number which he calls, and we'll get to that in a second here. But it also has like the numbers of all his friends, including Nozomi, and you can sort of call her and get unique dialogue that you only can get if you call them.
But you can't just like randomly call numbers?
You can, but it's like, oh, they didn't pick up,
Could you call this number? And then they'd be like, is this like a gameplay barrier? Where, like, if you call this number, they go, what's the code name? If you've never gotten that far, Rio's like, is this the Chen?
I've actually never tried that, and I'm curious now.
Now we gotta know.
But you could also call the cops, and that's where we get the line where he's like, I don't want to get them involved. Then he just immediately hangs up. But, so from there, he calls that 104 number, which is, like, the information hotline for, it's basically the operator, essentially, for Japan. And from there, he sort of tells them the area code, and they're like, oh, that's in Amihama in the warehouse district, and so he's sort of like, okay, that's where I need to go, Amihama.
I think it's weird that they didn't, like... he said all the code words, and then they still were like, wait, who is this? Yeah. It's like, you said the code words, who do you give a fuck it is? They obviously know what you are. Like, it's... whatever.
Is this the Chen residence? So after this, he's like, okay, I gotta take the bus to the harbor, basically. And this would be where disc 1 of the game ends. And so then you transition over to the second disc. So we go to the harbor, and Rio comes across these 3 thugs that are mugging this dude. He confronts them, and he says, the line's a little different, but he says, mugging is uncool, guys. It's out of style.
Damn.
Whereas in the game, he says, don't you know that blackmail is way uncool?
And that's way fucking better.
But also, like, what the fuck does that mean?
Exactly. I bet you that would intimidate them way more. They'd be like, "What did this
is he
motherfucker?"
retarded?
You'd have to think about that. You'd be like, "What the fuck? This man's unstable. I'm getting the fuck out of here."
So the two goons, they recognize Ryo and they're like, oh, that's a guy from Yokosuka High, like we shouldn't fuck with him. But Goro, who has this glorious pompadour, is like, I'm gonna fucking beat the shit out of this guy. He tries fighting Ryo, and Ryo just throws him into these garbage cans, and he lets the guy who's getting mugged get away. And I will say, like, one thing I do miss is like all the really cheesy like noises people make in the games, because in the game the noise he makes when he lets him go is like and he just runs off, whereas in this he's like hey, thanks man, like goodbye.
That would have been so much better.
They didn't even do it in the English dub of this, so it's like he lets that guy go, and
Okay.
So then Goro, he completely changes his tune, and he's like, oh, I'll do anything, like what do you want, like I'll help you with anything. And Ryo's like, hey, where's warehouse number 8? And he's like, oh, it's over there, you know. He points to it, and he's like, yeah, you should probably wait until after like 7, because that's when the guards all get off. And it's really different from how this sort of goes in the game. Like there is, I will say it's padding, honestly, because that's sort of what it is. There's like a new warehouse district and an old warehouse district, and each of them have a warehouse number 8. So first he goes to the new warehouse number 8, and he sort of overhears some of the workers there that they're like, yeah, they keep sending all this like, you know, stuff that's supposed to be going to warehouse number 8 and the old warehouse district. And so Ryo's like, I need to go there. And so we sort of skip over that, which I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it sort of is just something that is just padding, honestly, if we're being honest here. But, you know, so he goes to the old warehouse district, and we get something that is just straight up one of the QuickTime events from the game, where he's sneaking in, and the phone goes off in the little guard's office. He's sort of hunched over, and the phone causes him to, like, jump a bit, and he hits this thing that would have knocked over, like, a flashlight and alerted the guard. But he catches it, just like in the QTE.
I appreciate that they were that faithful. They put in QTE events.
There are actually a few of them, like that have been throughout the previous episodes. I didn't really draw attention to them, but
that one was wholly unnecessary.
Yeah,
except for just being like, you remember that?
There you go.
Yeah. Also, like, is back to the game where you go to the new warehouse and there's the old one. Can you just go straight to the old one? Or do you have to waste your time?
You have to waste your time.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like, from there, he sneaks past that first guard in the little guardhouse, and immediately gets captured by these people who throw him in a burlap bag.
Yeah, he just runs into a bag. They're like waiting for him by the guard station.
Yeah, and this is like way different than the game, because like in the game you have to like, it's like a stealth segment where you have to sneak around the guards in the old warehouse district and find warehouse number 8. Whereas in this, it's like he gets caught in the burlap bag and then immediately taken to warehouse number 8.
They're probably like, we don't want to animate that. And it's like, just fucking
burlap
put him
bag.
in a bag. Just put him in a bag.
So he gets brought into warehouse number 8, and it's sort of interesting because like we never saw much of the Chen organization besides Guizhang and Master Chen, but there were like 2 other goons with them there who brought Ryo in the burlap bag. You know, and so he's in there with them, and they're like, okay, release him or whatever.
Yeah, they tied him up just to be like, fucking, why'd you do that?
Like, it's like,
why
it's the kid
tie
who
him
called.
up?
Like, come on. He knew the code
It was
word.
a waste of rope.
Yeah. So they untie him, and Ryo is like, oh, I have this letter that instructed me to ask you for assistance. And really the letter was meant for his dad, but that's neither here nor there. And so he's like, yeah, seek the aid of Master Chen if you're ever in trouble. And they sort of talk about, because they see that the letter is signed by Yanda Zhu, and basically Master Chen is like, yeah, years ago, someone, you know, basically brought the mirror over to Japan, and Yanda Zhu was one of the people who was involved in bringing that to Japan, essentially. So we're getting some more backstory on who Yandazu is, as well as, like why it's important that Ryo's going to want to find him later on.
Is that something resolved in the first game?
No, that's in the second game. You
Okay.
don't meet him until, like, the end of, like, probably 2/3 of the way through Shenmue 2.
Damn. Okay.
And I mean, we'll get there. Like, I'm of the mindset that we're gonna get through the second game by the end of this season of the anime.
Yeah, it's going pretty fast.
Yeah. So from there, he's like, yeah, this guy Lon D stole one of the mirrors, and essentially then, Master Chen is like, Lon D, like, I sort of know who that is, like, vaguely. Like, he's the leader of this other cartel from China called the Chiyu Men. And we flash over to something that we don't see in the games, which is Lon D is in China, and they're speaking Chinese, which I think is a sort of cool little, I guess, way to make things feel more like, I guess, real, for lack of a better word. Whereas, like, in the English dub, everyone's speaking English the whole time, whereas in this, they switch over to Chinese because...
It's a good way to pace your anime, too. Like, in the game, I guess you can fucking spend more time and be more of a slow burn, but, like, to pace out your animes and remind people, like, oh, yeah, that's the villain. What are they up to, and this and that. Like, I see a lot of shows do that, where they balance, like, what's happening here? What's this?
Yeah. And so, like, I think this is, like, a flashback, because this is how, basically... Lon D found out about Yandazu and how he was the one who brought the mirror over to Japan. And so then from there, he's interrogating this guy in China, and the guy's like, okay, Yandazu is the one who did it. Like, that's the one you want to talk to figure out about this. So then after that, we sort of flash back to, Japan. And Master Chen is like, okay, there's one more mirror, the Phoenix mirror, and if Lon D got the dragon mirror, chances are good that he's gonna come back for the Phoenix mirror, so you probably need to sort of find that.
This is about the point where, like, I don't know, my dad's never been killed by a cartel captain, but I think at this point, if I learned that, I'd be like, oh no, oh shit, I'm 18?
No one uses guns, so it's okay. It's just all martial arts. You can do it.
Bitch. They're gonna fucking give me a Chinese necktie and fucking rip my eyes out of my head. Yeah, I'm good. Like, Lon D literally, like, could have killed him on the spot. But was like, you know what? I'm a nice guy. I'm not gonna do that. But fuck off. And I'd be like, fuck, man. My dad was tied up in cartels and got killed. That's rough. I think I gotta go on with my life at this point. Like, Ryo's fucking dedicated.
So from here, though, Ryo, he's like, okay, I gotta find this mirror. He leaves the warehouse district, and we see this sort of weird shot. I didn't notice it the first time I watched it, but I've seen it, like, 4 times at this point, just between, like, I watched it in English, then Japanese again, so I could write the synopsis, then with Ben.
Nice.
So I noticed that, for some reason, when Ryo is leaving the warehouse district, Goro is, like, spying on him. Like, you sort of see him
I saw that.
chilling there, and I didn't notice that the first time, and I'm wondering what that's going to lead to, because that's never anything that, like, happens in the game. So
I thought they were going to address that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what they're really going to do with that. From there, we get this basically scene with Guizhang and Master Chen, which is something that we don't really see much of their dynamic in the game. We get a bit more with that, and we see a different side to Master Chen where he's sort of being an asshole to his son.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, Dad, why the fuck are we helping this kid? He's like, you don't fucking call me Dad. We are in a crime syndicate. Like, you need to address me as your superior. Like, that's what this is. Mm-hmm. And he says a line which I think is fucking badass. He's like, the day we return to being father and son is the day we leave the underworld. The day we die.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit.
And it's like, god damn. And so from there, we go back to Ryo. He's looking around his house for clues about the Phoenix Mirror. He's looking through his dad's room. And he finds a sword in his father's room. They did sort of change the location of the sword. It's in the dojo in the game, in like a locked box that you find the key in your father's basically study, and then you sort of have to go from there. Like, just for the sake of, like, pacing, I think it's better to have it in the house, and then, he's sort of like, well, shit, why is this here? Like, why is there a sword here?
Yeah.
So he's
going
looking
through his dad's stuff after he's dead and stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's looking around the dojo, and he falls over like a dingus. Because he's looking behind this fucking poster on the wall. And Fukusan and Ine-san show up, and they're like, Rio, what happened? And so, they're patching him up. Ine-san's putting like a Band-Aid on his back for some reason.
Yeah.
And he's
helps.
shirtless, and it's like, look at how swole
His back
he
was
is.
fucking ripped, guys.
Yeah. She's sort of, he's talking to them about like, did father ever mention anything about another mirror in the house? And they're like, no, but Ine-san is like, there was this thing that Iwao entrusted to this antique shop dealer before he died, like a few days before he died. And that might be something that you want to look into. So he goes to basically the this antique shop, and the owner is like, oh yeah, like your dad basically gave me this and told me to keep an eye on it and polish it every day and all that stuff. And it's a sword handguard that has the family crest on it. And they sort of talk a bit about the Chen organization as well. We get this line where the antique shop owner is like, you really don't want to be messing around with those people, because like on the surface they have like the front for their illicit actions, and they're just like a trading company, but they're like underworld operations, like they smuggle in art and all this stuff, and they're people that you probably don't want to be associating with.
See, I heard all that, and I was like, oh shit. They're using Rio to get to the mirror, and then they're going to take the mirror from him or something. But like, they're art smugglers. You know, and what would be more priceless than this super like amazing mirror? I don't know. Like, I guess that would run kind of counter to the letter being like, go to this guy for help. But I was kind of like, if I was Rio, I'd be like, they do seem really interested in this mirror.
Yeah, and we'll get to something a bit later. Actually, like immediately the next scene, that's sort of like, it is presented in a different way in the anime. So from there, he's walking back home, and he notices that he's being tailed by someone, and he's like, hey, like, I know you've been tailing me for a few blocks now, just show yourself. And it's Guizhang, and in the game, Rio says something like, so you're working with Landi, and it's like sort of a thing where maybe they were implying that he was like, oh, they're after the mirror too, so they're probably working with him because they sent Guizhang to sort of, attack me or something. And so they tussle a bit, and it's very clear at this point that Guizhang is a lot more better at martial arts than him. He does this like cool jab in his face, and he's like, oh shit, it's one of those like slow-mo anime moments.
Cuts to commercial.
Yeah, and then they show you like a different shot going into that. That is where the commercial break happened.
Yep.
And so he's like, yeah, like my father instructed me to test you and to be your bodyguard. And Rio's like, well, why the fuck would he want that? Like, I'm just a nobody. Like, I don't mean anything in this. And he's like, you don't understand your fucking place in all this yet, do you? And it's like, what is that? Let's never elaborate on that ever again.
Yeah, he's again affirming. He's like, you're in way over your fucking head, aren't you? And he's like,
I'm going to fight a cartel leader.
Yeah.
So, he basically fights him a little bit, and, he warns Rio that he needs to find the mirror as soon as possible. And we get Chai sort of creeping around again on the rooftop. I want to say this is, in the game, the first time you see Chai is on the rooftop.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, it's sort of interesting, and I guess probably a net positive in the end that we've seen him throughout the show so far. Otherwise, it'd be like, who the fuck is that skinhead?
Right.
Just like hanging out.
Gollum motherfucker.
The
they
roof.
also like, they kind of like have Rio do a flashback where he's like, oh, like I just almost got my ass kicked by this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like when I almost got my ass kicked by that guy, Chen, or whatever they call him. I forget his name. Not Chen. Chai.
Yeah.
And I got my ass kicked from Landi. Oh, I suck. But he like beat shit
well, that thing,
out of Chai.
Yeah, that's later though. When he's
Is
in
it?
the dojo. Yeah. When he's with Fukusan. We'll get there though.
All right. Well, anyway.
We'll talk about that.
I wanted to say also with Chai, they like every time they show Chai, he's like...
And that is the
stupid
exact
fucking
noise that he makes in the game and the Japanese dub. So it's like they followed that pretty much to a T. Which I like. He's just this creepy fucking, like you said, Gollum looking motherfucker.
Yeah.
So from there,
Cut his nails.
no, he does not. So after that, he's walking back home and he comes across Nozomi and Mai, and they're just sort of talking in front of the flower shop that Nozomi and her family run. And they're sort of, he's like, oh, well, where would you hide a mirror, if you had one? And at first they're like, why would we hide a mirror? That's stupid. And then they say like, well, I don't like it when people watch me using a mirror. So like, I sort of wish I had like a secret room to have it. And Ryo's like, oh,
secret room.
yeah,
of course.
And so after that, Mai's like, hey, I gotta go back to help my family or whatever. And Nozomi is like trying to ask Ryo for advice about the future. And she just sort of runs off before anything comes of that.
It's not even how that, like, it was like, Ryo, I have to ask you something. And she's all blushing and fucking trying to keep her panties from falling on the ground. And he's like, what's up? She's like, I need advice on the future. And then he goes, huh? And she's like, wah! And runs away. That's how that went.
And he's just like, the future? What the hell is it?
Fuck
What's
you
she on about?
What are you saying to me right now?
So he goes back to the dojo, and him and Fukusan are sparring, and Ryo kicks his ass, and Fukusan is like, hey, you've gotten like super strong, like you're on a completely different level now, man. And Ryo, he sort of is just like thinking about all the people he's fought, like Londi, he couldn't lay a hand on him, he just got his ass kicked.
All right,
Chai, he beat, but he's also like, no, he's too strong.
Well, and that's what I wanted to say. Like, so it's at this moment, I guess, not the other one, where he's like reflecting on the fights.
Yeah.
And he acts like he wasn't good enough for Chai, but he beat him. And like, it would have been better thematically and would have made more sense with the game stuff if he didn't beat Chai. Like in that first episode of the anime.
Yeah.
Like it would have made us actually feel like his power level is like, oh, it was there, now it's here.
And that's why it's like, I don't know, it's sort of interesting that like Guizhang and Chai were sort of like, I don't know, not evenly matched. Like I think Guizhang was better, but Chai was more like cunning and just ran off after he threw that fucking jar at Guizhang. But I don't know, it's just interesting in that like we don't really have a good idea of what like the scale is for power, whereas like in anime usually that's like something that's very like apparent. Like you think of like Dragon Ball Z where that's like power levels is like a big thing that people talk about.
I just don't understand why they chose to have Chai lose that first fight in the first episode if they're going for like it seems like they're going for as accurate of a storytelling thing as the games are going for.
Yeah. And
keeping them intimidating and stuff, and yeah, to have a flashback where he's confused and like, oh, I'm not good enough for that, but he beat him. What the fuck?
Well, and that's why I'm like, once we get to what would have been the first fight with Chai in the game, in the arcade, if they even do that, like, I don't know that we're gonna actually do that at all, because, like, based on the previews for the next episode, it sort of seems like they're immediately going to him getting a job at the harbor, whereas, like, all the stuff with him fighting him in the arcade, that's stuff that happens when you're just trying to get a ticket to Hong Kong. So it's like, I don't know, it would be interesting to see if he loses a second fight that they have, but then wins the third fight at the harbor at the end of the first game, or the end of the, I guess, this part of the anime. But, you know, he's sort of reflecting on that, and after they've sparred, him and Fukusan, they're cleaning the dojo, and we just basically, like, this is probably the laziest way they could have done it.
Yeah.
To reveal the, basically them marking where the, you know, the Hazuki family crest, which is the handguard and the sword, are going to go into. And so Fukusan is like, yeah, what are these things on the wall behind these posters? Like,
that I conveniently
removed.
Just now for the first time.
Yeah, it's like, you got a lot of secrets here.
Yeah.
It's like, I've lived here a long time, but I don't...
Secret room? Could it be?
So he puts two and two together, and he sees the family crest. He's like, oh shit, the handguard goes there, and then the sword has its own little slot. He puts both of them in there, and it unlocks this basically secret door in the dojo that leads to this little basement. And he goes down and he finds it's a lot different from the game. He finds this basically like altar thing set up with this little box, and inside the box is the Phoenix mirror. Whereas in the game, I don't know if you remember where the mirror's hidden
like
in
the wall, and you stick your hand in or something.
Yeah, there's like a fake wall that's you have to like investigate the basement to find, and then he gets this fucking axe and breaks a hole into the wall.
Jesus.
And finds the Phoenix mirror hidden there. But he finds it, and basically like the light from the doorway like reflects off the mirror and points towards this photo that's on one of the shelves. And he pulls the photo out, and it's a photo of his father when he was younger in Bailu Village with someone else that we don't know yet. It's like, oh, who could that be? And so he looks at that, and we get a funny little Easter egg. We've had sort of similar ones where it's the like Sega branded like photo paper on there.
Sega film.
Yeah. And they do that all through the games. Like the batteries are like Sega branded batteries. Like they
do they actually make stuff like that, or is it just
no?
Yeah,
it's just a funny little thing. But
I think it's interesting that like so there was all that process that went into getting the Phoenix mirror, and Ryo's dad gave the hilt that would have opened that wall like away right before. He was like, "Oh, you hold on to this." So he like knew that Londi was coming or something.
Yeah,
he knew something was happening.
There's one thing that they do not do that they did in the game. If you like immediately after the your father is murdered, you sort of can look around the house and like investigate things on your own. There's a letter that Iwao left to Ryo before he died that sort of is like, oh, he knew he was going to die. Like it's like you need to live by your convictions and die by your convictions. And he's like, that's how I lived my life in past tense, you know? And it's like, oh, and Ryo even puts it together. He's like, oh, he knew Londi was coming. So it's like, yeah. And I do, like, I'm glad that you picked up on that, even though they didn't explicitly say that, like, in the letter that you see. Yeah, like,
yeah, for him to just randomly be like, well, hold on to this just in case.
Yeah. So that's just sort of cool stuff like that. But from there, let me go back to the sort of thing. Oh, and one other thing that I just want to talk about, and it's like we still to this day don't know why it's significant, but when he's in the basement, you can, through your investigation, like you open a book and a white leaf falls out of one of the pages of the book, and you take it with you along the journey. He's like, the leaf is like not dead, and he's like, that's weird that it's probably been in here a long time, because like the basement is like covered in dust. He's like, but the leaf is still fine. It's just this white leaf. And that's something that is like a key item that is imported when you import your save to Shenmue 2, and then likewise is still a thing you have in Shenmue 3, even though you can technically miss it. Like you don't have to get that, but that's something that's because like you can import like your save from Shenmue 2 to Shenmue 3. They just start you off with a set inventory
from the Shenmue tree,
and that's what we don't know. So it's like it's this weird thing where I'm like, is it actually important because we didn't see it in this, you know? And it's just
that's true.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It's just interesting stuff that they've sort of changed, or like they're not wanting to focus on. But from there, after he finds the mirror, he basically goes back to warehouse number 8, and he shows Master Chen that he got the mirror. And from there, Master Chen sort of goes into this legend around the mirrors and what they might cause to happen if they're brought together. He's like, yeah, if both of them are brought together, then a monster called Shio will resurrect itself on Earth and devour the world.
I want you guys to like, that might have gone past you. I want you to slow it down and run that by it again. So like, imagine your father just got killed by El Chapo, and and he goes back to Mexico, and you're like, I got to get to Mexico to kill El Chapo, you know, like you would do. And then you're investigating, you get to the guy, and he's like, hold on, El Chapo's part of the fucking, I don't know what gang, the Demon Head gang. The
Yeah.
Demon Head actually refers to one of Satan's lieutenants, Beelzebub, and it's a legend that he's going to resurrect, and that's what El Chapo's he's trying to bring back a demon, actually. So not only is he the head of a cartel, he's trying to put Satan on Earth. And then you would go, well, I'm still going to get him.
No, that's when you call a fucking...
An exorcist?
An exorcist.
I don't know what.
But like, sort of going into like possible spoilers for the future, one of the other things that they talk about the mirrors possibly being like used for is that they're like, yeah, if you have both mirrors, then it will lead to the treasure of like the Qin dynasty, essentially, which was like the first dynasty in China. And like, it's like destiny that whoever finds that treasure will become like the next emperor of China, essentially, or the next leader of China. And so it's like sort of this weird thing where there's like a disconnect between the like, could it actually be like a demon that it's gonna summon, or is it just like treasure, beyond your wildest dreams sort of thing?
That would redeem it. If it was like ancient legend that it was a demon, but it's actually just some like ceramic soldier, and they're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, it's like there's Chio, the statue.
I don't know. It's just getting wild. Like all this, it's a lot of exposition dump into fucking supernatural shit.
Well,
and it's
it's
like, that's happening too?
I think, like, I don't know, what I'm sort of getting the gist of is that, like, because it's such an old legend, people have sort of come up with their own, like, well, we don't know what the mirrors do.
But there has to be something to it, because, they wouldn't allude to all this stuff.
There's something to it, but it's like,
we
just don't know for sure what
how weird it's gonna get.
Yeah,
like,
and that's and there's stuff that happens in Shenmue 3 that, like, with Shenhua, where it's like, she doesn't shoot beams or anything.
Yeah.
But, like, it's sort of my understanding that, like, Yu Suzuki is like, because he did all, like, before he made the games, he did all this research in China. Like, he talked with all these martial arts masters and stuff. And so he sort of got fascinated with, like, the idea of, like, chi, which is, like, energy that's in all life sort of thing, basically the Force. And so, like, they sort of allude to things that, like, Shenhua may have some level of control over this. Like, there's this character that in Shenmue 3 can't get him to talk. He won't spill the beans about anything. She's like, let me talk to him. And she fucking does something to get him to talk, and he looks terrified afterwards. Like, you go back in and he's like, just get her away from me. Like, I told her everything. And you're like, you never address it whatsoever in that game. It's just like, it's like, what did she do to him? I don't fucking know. It's like Lashif at fucking Casino Royale. I don't know.
There's a balance you could, like, and they haven't overstepped the balance yet, but I don't want them to. Like, it's still grounded and there's still realistic stuff. But if it turns out that, like, Lan Di wants the mirrors to bring a demon god onto the realm of man, it's like, what is happening?
And that's why I'm like, I think that was maybe initially what they were going to do, but then because fans were like, yeah, we sort of like that, like, the story is grounded, I think maybe they were like, maybe it's just treasure.
I don't understand how they wouldn't think it'd be grounded when you can literally just, like, individually open drawers and finger one thing at a time. But how are you gonna fight? I don't know. It's weird.
Fight the demons.
Yeah, like, you can have chi and you can have the mirrors being like, maybe they have, like, an old mystic property, and maybe Lan Di wants to try to find out what that was. But if Lan Di just knows that it's gonna open the portals of hell, I don't know.
And that's why I'm like, I'm curious to see where all this goes, and that's why fans want another fucking game to figure out what the fuck is going on.
It's just like, excuse me. Oh, we'll explain it.
We'll explain it later.
Yeah.
Wait for Shenmue 4 or maybe 5. I don't know. So they're talking about all this stuff with Master Chen, and he's like, no matter what, like, even though, like, we're not sure if that's what's going to happen if he gets the mirrors, all we know is that Lan Di is planning on getting both of them for whatever it is.
He keeps showing this, like, this, like, ceramic plate he has in the warehouse with, like, Chi Yu on it, and he's, like, this demon-looking thing.
Yeah.
It's spooky.
So from there, Chai sort of jumps in, and he's trying to steal the mirror because he's been listening in throughout this, and he knows that the second mirror is with them. and he takes it from Ryo, and then he sort of tussles with Guizhang a little bit, and Guizhang sort of gets the best of him, and so Chai, he just throws a pot at him and jumps up onto this scaffolding so that he can escape. And we get another one of the things that was a QTE in the game where they're like, hey, press this button so that way you can cause this scaffolding to like move and knock him down. So
I asked what happened if you failed it, and apparently Chai just fucking dips with the mirror, and
he dips with it.
Ryo's like, well, I guess I ended the world, and that's just like the end.
Nah,
you have to try it again.
They have you try again in the event that you fail that. There are some QTEs that like you're allowed to fail, I guess, in air quotes, where it's
not
like
that one.
Yeah, not that one though. That's like, okay, you really fucked up.
I wanted to try to get away with it so we could see what the fuck happens.
Yeah. So from there, Chai, after he loses the mirror, he's like, fuck you guys, and he jumps out the window. And so after he leaves, Master Chen and Guizhang are talking about the Mad Angels. We get a little bit more backstory on who they are. Basically, they're arms and drug dealers, and they're like, yeah, in the past few years, they've really risen to prominence in Yokosuka, and, we're sort of in battle with them. And from there, they're like, yeah, they probably are the ones who brought Londi here as, like, his guide, basically.
And this is where the theme music kicks in, so you know the episode's wrapping up.
Essentially, yeah. And so, he's basically like, well, where are they going to take Londi now? And they're like, oh, he's probably going back to Hong Kong, because that's where the Chiyu men have, like, a base of operations. And so, from there, Rio's like, oh, well, you should give me a ticket to Hong Kong, or help me get to Hong Kong. And Master Chen is like, no, like, you are not, strong enough to do this. Like, you're putting yourself up against the cartel.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He's an adult. And
He's
it's like, how old are you?
He's like, I would be putting you in line with, like, criminals. Like, you're not fit for this. Like, I don't want you to throw your life away just seeking revenge. And Rio is, like, sort of trying to appeal to Guizhang, and he's like, well, what would you do if your father was killed right in front of you? And at first, Guizhang is sort of like, he's like, oh, shit, like, yeah, like, I would, even though my dad's sort of an asshole, like, I would fucking do the same thing if I were in your shoes. But Master Chen sort of stops that line of thought before it goes anywhere, and he's like, no, like, we're not doing this. Like, you're staying here. That's it. We're not getting you involved with this. Go home, basically. And so from there, basically Londi, we see him leaving Japan on a boat, and he's like, okay, I gotta find Yandazu. And that's
They also do this thing where, like, Guizhang is like, sees how serious Rio is, and he's like, hey 18-year-old kid, aren't you afraid of fucking dying?
Oh yeah.
And Rio just goes, no. And it's like, what?
Well, in Rio, like, they've really doubled down on this in the anime. Like, in the games, it's really just about him getting vengeance. Like, they sort of allude to him being like, is my father really who he thought he was? But in this, they're, like, really doubling down on, like, like, part of his motivation is to clear his father's name in a way, and like, because he sort of is like, was my father involved in this underworld stuff too? And Master Chen's like, I can't say for sure, like, I don't know. But we end the episode there. Another cliffhanger. We're sort of building towards what I think is probably gonna be like wrapping up the first game and like the next 2 episodes, because like there really isn't much left in the first game. Like, we have him getting the ticket maybe to Hong Kong, and then him getting the job at the harbor, and then from there it's like the 70-man fight with the Mad Angels, which
nice.
I'm fucking psyched for, because
that'll be cool.
That fight in the game is fucking awesome, because like it's so mundane up until that point, and then you're like, okay, here's literally an entire gang that you have to fight, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So it's like,
this is why I worked the forklift.
Yeah. This is why I trained in the parking lot for hours in real life to make my moves stronger. So what did you think of the episode overall? We've sort of, I feel like, been building mystery and like sort of incorporating new things that are elements that aren't even in the game. What did you think?
It was good. I like it more than the first episode, maybe a little less than the second. just pacing wise, but you know, it's still building interesting things. It's just so weird, all the weird supernatural stuff they're bringing in. I'm like, all right,
yeah.
let's see what happens, I guess. It's just it's snowballing.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, it's not just the head of our cartel. He's the demon lord, this and that. He's calling Cthulhu. It's like, okay. But it was good. There weren't really any fights, though. Like, Guizhang ambushed him, and that was kind of it.
Yeah,
so the animation didn't get to, like, shine, really.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that they're going to take things, like, I don't know, because this episode, it was slow, because that part of the game is slow.
Yeah.
When he starts working in the harbor, there's thugs that are, like, trying to rough him up and stuff. So there are fights that happen throughout the time you're working at the harbor with the forklift. You know, and then it all culminates in that 70-man battle and then a rematch with Chai.
Yeah. This is when I would, if you told me there was going to be a Shenmue anime, I'd be like, how are you going to make it interesting? And this is one of those episodes where it's like, yeah, how are you going to make this interesting? Where you're opening secret rooms and you need like 5 different things to get the keys to open the secret door. And it's like, that's a lot.
I feel like they struck a good balance, though, with, like, in the games, obviously, like, a bigger emphasis is placed on, like, investigation and stuff like that. Whereas in this, they're like, you know, let's just get that done.
We need to move the plot.
Let's move to point A to point B really fast. And I do appreciate it because I'm like, you know, this would be the point in the game where you'd probably lose a lot of people. And so sort of moving things along and sort of explaining what the stakes are throughout it, like talking about Landi and why it's bad if he gets both mirrors.
I guess it felt like, I liked the second episode more because it felt like it was building to the fight with Charlie and confronting Charlie.
Yeah.
And then he does. This one, it's building, he gets the Phoenix mirror and it's like, now what? Yeah. And it's just like, now you go to Hong Kong. And it's like, so just another,
but not really, though.
They just like push the goalposts.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right. So it's not as interesting, but it's still fine. It didn't upset me.
Yeah.
There wasn't too much besides that fucking grandmother's body that was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was an interesting decision. But so sort of alluding to that, you know, at the pace we're going, we're a little over basically what would be like a third of the first game. You know, and I sort of talked about this. At the pace we're going, I think we're probably going to get to the end of the second game. I've sort of changed my mind because initially I was like, there's no way we get to the end of Shenmue 2 because, like, the last third of that game is very slow. It's you walking through the forest with Shenhua just, like, talking for, like, an entire disc worth of game. Because it's like, they're like, yeah, it's like a 4-day walk to Guilin. Or to Bailu Village from where they are.
And you do those 4 days.
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But it's like, I don't know, when you're actually in it, I mean, it goes
How do you play this?
It's not like, because each, just to sort of give you context, like, a day in Shenmue is an hour in real time.
Okay. So you watch a Lord of the Rings extended edition movie, but it's just you talking to an NPC in broken English.
That's neither here nor there.
Oh my god.
Without the context of, like, okay, so, like, what makes it, I don't know, sort of, like, important is that you've had dreams about this character throughout the first 2 games.
Yeah.
And so when you finally meet her, it's like, oh, this is just, like, a normal person. Like, who is she? Like, you're learning about each other and asking each other questions, sort of thing. You know, and you're talking about your past, sort of filling in some of the gaps that we don't know with Ryo's past. Like, he talks about his friends, his father, and what he thought of him. Like, you can sort of decide whether or not it's like, yeah, he was a good person overall, or you can say, like, he was sort of cold, actually. You know, and it's stuff that, like...
Okay. Like, you're actively picking...
Yeah, it's all dialogue trees and stuff. Like, you are engaging with it.
All right. I was kind of imagining just, like, an exposition dump.
No.
Okay.
And they do more of that in Shenmue 3 as well. Like, each day ends with, like, an optional thing where you can talk to Shenhua just about whatever, you know, and sort of, like, choose different options, you know, and just go from there. But, you know, so at the pace we're going at, I'm like, okay, we may, like, they're going to obviously speed through that. They'll probably do that in, like, one
actually,
episode.
we're getting a 1-to-1 4-hour animation.
Yeah, the last 6 episodes.
That would be an interesting twist. That'd be very Shenmue of the anime to do.
So yeah, we're probably gonna get there. We're gonna get to the cave, which we talked about previously. It's like they're gonna start in the cave and then end in the cave.
That's what I think. Yeah.
So yeah, we're getting things wrapped up. So with that, do you have any sort of final thoughts you want to talk about before we wrap things up, or
Just kind of resigned that the names of the episodes in this anime don't make any sense. Why is this one called Yin Yang?
So my thought on that is that like Rio is yin and Guizhang is yang.
Who the fuck is Guizhang?
It's Master Chen's son.
Oh, Guizhang. I'm sorry. There's so many. There's like Yang. I was thinking of Yangzhu or whoever.
Yandazu.
Yandazu. Yeah.
I think that's the idea, is that like Rio is so intent on like figuring out, or like, you know, fighting for his father's basically, you know, like to clear his name, whereas Guizhang is like, I can't because my dad doesn't want me to.
See, that's good. Keep the names as vague as possible so that we have to be like,
well,
maybe
and the next episode,
we can draw meaning from it.
The next episode is called Shackles, and I'm like, is this like the shackles of a job? Or is this like the shackles of Nozomi getting captured, like in the game?
Commentary up in here.
Like, I don't know, like we'll sort of see where things go from there, but you know, just sort of an additional sort of thing. I did recently beat, because I'm replaying the games with the Japanese dialogue for the first time. Like I'd sort of bounced in and out of that before, but I've never completed them with the Japanese dub. So I beat Shenmue 1, and my plan is to have Shenmue 2 beat by the end of the anime. So we'll sort of see how that goes. But after sort of because like previously to this episode, I wasn't caught up to where we were in the anime, but now that I've like replayed it, I'm like, this is pretty good. Like, I feel like this hits everything I want it to hit as far as like important story beats, and I feel like it is respecting the source material to a pretty good degree, which is sort of unheard of for video game adaptations, especially. Like,
I'm still very impressed. Yeah, that it's like, wow, this still feels like a Shenmue anime.
Yeah,
so that's good.
All right, so with that, we're going to wrap things up for this episode of the Boyos Discuss. If you enjoyed it, and you're watching on YouTube, then we'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe to the channel. And let us know what you thought about the episode in the comments as well. So we'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about episode 4, Shackles. Until next time.
Don't you know that blackmail is way uncool?